Deterrence AI, the leading blog in proactive security.
Okay, so you want to understand like the next big thing in security, right?
Yeah.
But who has time to read a ton of articles? Well, today we're going to like dive straight into how artificial intelligence is completely changing the game when it comes to security.
Yeah, it really is. It's, reshaping the whole security landscape.
Totally, yeah. So we're talking AI-driven security and its impact on how we stop threats, both digital and physical.
Yeah, that's it. Like everything from, like your home security system to like huge cyber attacks, nation state level stuff.
Exactly.
So this deep dive that we're doing, it's based on like a really great guide, right? That explores how AI is changing security, particularly when it comes to like proactively managing threats.
Right, getting ahead of the game.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really cool is that it's rooted in like solid research and real world examples.
Yeah.
Like, real stuff.
It's not just theory. It's like real application.
Yeah. And it really focuses on making these complex ideas, accessible, like understandable.
Yeah, which is so important, especially here in Australia, right?
Yeah, especially here in a Western context. Absolutely.
Yeah. So our goal today is to give you like a full picture of AI-driven security, right? Like what it is, how it's being used, what its potential is.
Yeah.
And, like what we need to be thinking about as it keeps evolving.
Yeah, definitely. Those big picture questions are crucial.
Totally. Yeah. So, cutting through the jargon.
Yeah.
So you can actually understand what matters right now.
Absolutely.
So to kick things off, let's think about like that basic concept of deterrence, right?
Yeah. So at its core, like deterrence is about like preventing unwanted actions, right?
Yeah.
By making the potential downsides like way outweigh the possible benefits.
Right. Making it not worth it to even try, basically.
Yeah. And the thinking on this, as our source material points out, like, goes way back. I mean, like back to Enlightenment thinkers like Beccaria and Bentham.
Oh, wow. So like really fundamental ideas.
Yeah. Super fundamental.
Yeah.
So their key insight, right, was that if the punishment for a crime is like certain, swift, and proportionate, then like rational people are less likely to do it,
Right. It's logic, right?
Yeah.
If you know you're going to get caught and the punishment is bad, you're probably not going to risk it.
Exactly. But of course, this early thinking kind of assumed like this perfect rationality,
Right.
Which we know in the real world, like people aren't always rational.
Yeah. Especially when emotions run high or, desperation kicks in. Like rational thinking can go right out the window.
Exactly. Now, where this gets really interesting is when we like fast forward, right? Like to the Cold War.
Okay. Yeah. Big jump. So what changes there?
Well, this is when the idea of nuclear deterrence, like may not be mutually assured destruction, becomes like central to global security.
Right. The whole if you nuke us, we'll nuke you back kind of thing.
That's it. And the focus, right, it shifts to like the credibility of a retaliatory strike.
So it's not just about having the weapons. It's about convincing your enemy that you're actually willing to use them, right?
Totally. The idea was that like no country would attack first because they knew like the response would be like total devastation,
Right. Like it was a whole different game. So
Okay.
much higher stakes.
Yeah. It was a tense game of like signaling capabilities and clear red lines,
Yeah. Like don't cross this line.
Yeah.
Or else.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the key difference. That was a world of like defined nation states, right?
Right. Like you knew who the players were.
You knew who had the weapons. And broadly, you knew what would trigger like a response. Now, when you think about cyberspace, something you've probably experienced, encountered, seen in the news, applying those old deterrence ideas becomes like way harder.
Yeah, way more complex.
Way more complex.
Yeah, like with all the hacking and cyber attacks we hear about, it feels like a whole different ballgame.
It really is. And that's exactly what our sources point to. Like there are so many challenges. One of the biggest is attribution, right?
Attribution. So like figuring out who actually launched an attack.
Yeah, exactly. Because in cyberspace, it's incredibly difficult to definitively like identify who's behind an attack.
Right. Like you can't just look at a missile and say, oh, that came from that country.
Exactly. Attackers can use all sorts of like techniques to hide their identities.
Right. Like what kind of things?
Well, anonymous networks, proxy servers, sometimes even state-backed actors like operate through other groups, like to make it look like it's not them.
So like it's a deliberate attempt to create confusion.
Totally. So if you can't even be sure who attacked you, how do you even begin to, like, think about retaliation?
Right. It's like, who do you even retaliate against?
Exactly. And then it's not just about, like, identifying the attacker. Right. Think about the cost. Like, launching a significant cyber attack, it can be, like, relatively cheap compared to, like, building traditional weapons like tanks and missiles.
Oh, wow. So there's a lower barrier to entry.
Yeah, much lower. And that means, like, a way wider range of right, not just nation states, but cyber criminals,
Right.
hacktivist groups.
So like anyone with the technical skills could potentially be a threat.
Exactly. And then you've got, like, the speed and scale of cyber attacks.
Right. Like how quickly they can happen.
Yeah, they can happen like that, instantaneously and spread globally, like in minutes.
Yeah.
Like traditional response times, they can't keep up.
No way. Like by the time you figured out what's happening, the damage is already done.
Exactly. And then, like, to make things even more complicated, the guide emphasizes, like, the lines between different types of cyber activity, they're often blurred.
Right. So it's not always clear cut who's behind it and what their motives are.
No.
Right.
Like, is it a state-sponsored attack?
Right.
Is it a criminal operation?
Right.
Or is it just someone, like, making a political statement?
Right. Like hacktivists.
Yeah, exactly. And figuring that out obviously complicates, like, how you respond, right?
Yeah. Like if it's a criminal gang stealing data, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if it's a foreign government trying to disrupt critical infrastructure, that's a whole other level.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's this, like, fundamental question of, like, what even is a proportionate response in cyberspace?
Right. That's a really tricky one. Like what's the equivalent of, say, an airstrike in the digital world?
Exactly. If someone steals data, do you, like, steal data back?
Right.
If they disrupt a service, do you try and disrupt theirs?
Yeah.
It's this minefield,
Yeah.
ethically and strategically,
Totally. Yeah. It's uncharted territory in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And the potential for things to go wrong, like unintended consequences in our interconnected world, like that's huge.
It's massive, yeah.
So given all these difficulties with like traditional deterrence in cyberspace, the guide we're looking at points to a different approach. What is that alternative?
So the guide highlights this growing emphasis on deterrence by denial.
Okay. Deterrence by denial? What does that mean?
So this is all about, like, making attacks harder to pull off, right?
Yeah.
And less likely to succeed.
Okay.
So it's about strong defenses.
All right.
And basically, like, raising the cost for anyone trying to attack.
So like making it so difficult and risky that they just give up.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not worth the effort. And this is where AI-driven security comes in, right?
Okay, yeah. We've been talking around AI.
Yeah.
But like, what is it? For our listeners who are hearing this term everywhere, let's break it down.
Yeah, sure.
Like, what are the core AI concepts we need to get our heads around?
The guide does a good job of, like, explaining this clearly. So, like, at a high level, right, artificial intelligence, AI, is about creating machines that can, like, mimic, like, human intelligence.
Yeah.
Like learning, problem solving, decision making.
So like making computers think more like humans.
Yeah, exactly. And in security, the goal is to use AI to automate and improve how we detect, respond to, and even, like, anticipate threats,
Okay, so like make our defenses smarter and faster, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And machine learning, or ML, is, like, a key part of this.
Right, we hear about ML a lot too.
Yeah, so think of ML as, like, AI systems that can learn from data,
Okay.
without needing someone to program them for every single situation.
So they're not just following pre-programmed rules, they're actually learning and adapting.
Exactly. Like, they can identify patterns, make predictions, and, like, get better over time as they see more data.
Oh, that's interesting. So like the more they learn, the smarter they get.
Exactly.
How does that learning process actually work, though?
So our source explains different types of machine learning, right?
Okay.
So you have supervised learning.
Yeah.
That's like training a system using labeled data.
Labeled data.
So imagine, like, a spam filter, right?
Okay.
It learns by being shown emails that are already labeled as spam or not spam.
Right. So it's like, this is what spam looks like. This is what a normal email looks like.
Exactly. So it learns to associate certain features with each category.
Okay, got it. So what about unsupervised learning?
So unsupervised learning is more about finding hidden patterns in, like, unlabeled data, right?
Right.
So, for example, you have an AI analyzing network traffic, right?
Yeah.
It might detect, like, unusual groupings of activity that could indicate an attack, even without being told what an attack looks like specifically.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like It's finding anomalies, things that just don't look right.
Exactly. And then there's reinforcement learning, which is like training through trial and error.
Okay.
So the system gets rewards for doing the right thing,
Right.
like successfully blocking a malicious connection. And it learns to like optimize its behavior over time.
So it's like it's learning by doing and getting feedback.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, there's also this thing called deep learning, which sounds like even more advanced.
It is, yeah. It's a more sophisticated type of machine learning.
Okay.
And it uses like artificial neural networks with multiple layers.
Multiple layers. That's the deep part.
That's the deep part.
Okay.
So think of it like a more complex version of machine learning, right?
Okay.
It uses these layers to find really intricate patterns, kind of like how our brains work with all those interconnected neurons.
Right. Like lots of connections happening all at once.
Yeah. So these networks are really good at processing like complex, raw data.
Okay. So like what kind of things is deep learning good at?
So the guide highlights how it's like particularly effective in areas like image recognition, right? So think facial recognition on a security camera.
Okay.
And natural language processing.
NLP. We hear that a lot too.
Yeah.
What is NLP and how is that used in security?
Okay, so natural language processing lets computers understand and process human language.
Okay.
So in security, right, NLP has several key applications like, it can analyze the content of emails, right, or other messages to identify potential phishing attempts, looking for suspicious language or patterns.
So instead of a human having to read through thousands of emails, NLP can be like, hey, this one looks fishy.
Exactly. Saves a lot of time. And it improves accuracy, too.
Makes sense. So what else can NLP do in security?
So it can also be used to, like, sift through huge amounts of security logs, right?
Cool.
And incident reports to extract, like, the important information.
It's like finding the needle in the haystack.
Exactly. And then you might even, like, interact with security chatbots, right?
Okay.
Powered by NLP. And it can be used to analyze open source intelligence, like news articles and research, to uncover clues about new threats.
Oh, wow. So it's like gathering intel from the internet to stay ahead of the bad guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So last AI concept for our listeners.
Okay.
Generative AI, or GenAI, is the one that can create new content, right?
That's it.
It seems like this could be both good and bad for security.
It really is. It's like a double-edged sword, right? So on the defensive side, as the guide explains, GenAI is really useful, like simulating realistic attack scenarios.
Okay.
Like you can create fake phishing emails to test your defenses.
So like running drills to see if your systems can catch them?
Yeah, exactly. It can also generate synthetic data, right? To help train other AI security models.
So like creating practice data to make the AI smarter.
Yeah, and it can even automate the writing of security reports, which is pretty cool.
Oh, wow. So it can help the good guys get better at defending.
Totally. But then there's the flip side, right? The offensive use. And that's where it gets a little scary.
Okay, yeah, that's the part I was worried about.
Yeah, so our source highlights how attackers can leverage GenAI to create much more like sophisticated phishing emails.
Oh, no.
That are harder to detect.
So like even trickier than the ones we get now.
Exactly. And they could potentially generate like deep fake videos or audio, right?
Deep fakes. That's where it looks or sounds like someone's saying something they never did, right?
Exactly. And they could use that for like social engineering attacks.
Oh, wow. So like tricking people into giving up sensitive information or access.
Exactly. And then like even scarier, they could automate the creation of like new and evolving malware.
So like constantly churning out new viruses and stuff.
Yeah. So knowing what the bad guys can potentially do with GenAI is like essential for us to like build effective countermeasures.
Yeah, if you don't know what you're up against, how can you defend yourself?
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of ground with these different AI concepts.
Yeah.
Now, how does all of this actually work together?
Right.
Like in the real world?
Yeah.
What are the core components of like AI-driven defense?
The guide describes AI-driven security as like more of an ecosystem, right?
An ecosystem. What do you mean by that?
So like, different tools and platforms, right?
Yeah.
All working together. So one key component is like AI-powered endpoint detection and response, or EDR.
EDR. Okay.
So these systems are constantly monitoring individual devices, right? Like laptops, servers, for any unusual activity.
Okay.
And AI, it enhances this by analyzing behavior patterns,
Okay.
like establishing what's normal and flagging anything that's different. And that can help detect even brand new threats, you know?
Oh, wow. So even if it's a type of attack that's never been seen before, the AI can still pick up on it.
Yeah, if it's acting weird, the AI will be like, hold on, that's not right.
So it's like having a security guard who knows your routines and knows when something's off.
Exactly. And then it also helps with like proactively searching for hidden threats.
Oh, okay.
And it can even automate responses, like isolating an infected computer.
So it's not just detecting, it's actually taking action to stop the threat.
Exactly.
That's a big improvement over like just having traditional antivirus.
Yeah, huge improvement.
Okay, so what else is there in this AI security toolbox?
So another crucial component is security information and event management.
SIEM.
Yeah, so these systems gather log data from all over the place, right?
Okay.
Across an organization's IT infrastructure.
So like collecting all the digital footprints of what's happening on the network.
Yeah, exactly. And when you add AI, particularly user and entity behavior analytics, UEBA, it becomes much smarter.
Okay, UEBA. So what does that do?
AI can like filter out all the noise of normal activity, right?
Okay.
And it can correlate events that might seem unrelated but are actually part of a bigger attack.
So it can see the connections that a human analyst might miss.
Yeah, exactly. And it can detect unusual behavior, right,
Right.
for users and devices. And then it can prioritize alerts so security teams know what to focus on first.
So it's like it's helping them see the forest for the trees.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about securing devices. We've talked about securing the whole network. What about network security, like specifically?
So that's where network detection and response, or NDR, and network traffic analysis, or NTA, come in.
Okay, NDR and NTA.
Yeah. And with AI, these systems can do like sophisticated analysis of encrypted network traffic.
Encrypted traffic, that's the stuff that's scrambled so you can't read it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But they can analyze it without actually decrypting it, which is good for privacy.
Okay, so you can still get insights without actually seeing the sensitive data.
Exactly. And they can also identify like attackers moving laterally within a network.
Laterally.
So that means like once they're already inside,
Right.
they're trying to move around, get to more valuable stuff.
So it's like they breach one part of the network and then try to spread from there.
Exactly. And these systems can also detect communication between compromised systems and the attacker's infrastructure.
So like finding the secret messages they're sending back and forth.
Yeah, it's called command and control.
Okay, so we've got our devices covered, we've got our networks covered, we've got our overall systems covered. What about the physical world? Like our source talks about video surveillance.
Yeah, so AI is like totally changing video surveillance, right?
Okay, so how so? What can these AI-powered cameras do?
So modern security cameras, they can use AI for object detection, like distinguishing between a person, a vehicle, or an animal.
Oh, that's handy. So you don't get an alert every time a cat walks by.
Exactly. And then there's facial recognition, which, you know, has some ethical considerations.
Right, we'll get to those a bit later.
Yeah.
What else can these cameras do?
So they can analyze behavior too, you know,
Okay, like what?
like detect if someone's loitering suspiciously
Okay.
or someone has like fallen and needs help.
Okay.
And they can automatically detect intrusions, you know, like if someone enters a restricted area, all without like a human having to watch the feed constantly.
So it's like having a much more attentive security guard, but it's a computer.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a lot of eyes, but much smarter eyes. What about those phishing emails we all get? Is AI helping with those too?
Totally. AI-based phishing detection tools are getting super effective, right?
Okay.
They don't just analyze the content, right? They look at the sender's reputation, the destination of any links, and even like the language used.
So like they're analyzing the whole picture, not just looking for keywords.
Exactly. And that lets them identify really sophisticated phishing attempts.
The ones that could even trick a careful person.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And keeping software up to date, that's still important.
Oh, yeah. Super important.
But AI can help with vulnerability management too, right?
Absolutely. So AI can analyze information about like known software weaknesses, vulnerabilities,
Okay.
and then prioritize which ones to patch based on, you know, like, are they being actively exploited? What's the potential impact if they are exploited?
But so it's not just about patching everything. It's about patching the right things first.
Yeah, the most critical ones.
Okay. Makes sense. And the last one on our list here is threat intelligence platforms.
Yeah.
How does AI work with those?
So threat intelligence is about gathering information about like potential threats, right?
Okay.
And AI can process tons of this data from different sources,
Like where?
like threat feeds, you know, security blogs, even like less obvious sources
Okay.
to identify emerging threats,
Okay.
understand how attackers operate,
Okay.
and pinpoint those like indicators of compromise, those telltale signs that an organization should be looking for.
So it's like connecting the dots to get a bigger picture of what's out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what's key here is that like these AI-powered security components, they usually don't operate in isolation.
Right.
They often share data,
Okay.
and insights with each other. And that creates a much more like comprehensive and effective defense.
So it's like a team effort, but with AI players on the team.
Exactly.
Okay. So AI is providing all these enhanced tools, but what does it actually look like in terms of like finding threats?
Right.
Like how is it helping us see the unseen, as the source puts it?
I like that, seeing the unseen. One of AI's biggest strengths is like going beyond just looking for like known threats, right? Like those digital signatures, it can actually find totally new attacks.
Oh, wow.
And a cornerstone of this is anomaly detection, right?
Anomaly detection.
So AI, it learns what normal behavior looks like, right,
Okay.
across your systems
Okay.
for users, devices, network traffic.
Okay.
And then it flags anything that deviates significantly.
So it's like it knows the baseline, and then it's looking for anything that sticks out.
Exactly. So even if it's an attack that AI has never encountered before, it can raise an alert if something's acting weird.
Oh, that's interesting. Like what kind of weird behavior are we talking about?
Well, for example, a user suddenly accessing files they never normally touch, right?
Okay.
Or a server connecting to an unusual location.
So it's like it's picking up on those subtle changes that a human might not even notice.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. And what about behavioral analysis? That's UEBA, right?
Yeah, so UEBA really zeroes in on like individual user activities, right? It compares what a user is doing not only to their own past behavior, but also to what their like peer group typically does.
So like, is this person acting differently than they normally do?
Yeah, and are they acting differently than others in their role?
Right.
And that's really valuable for detecting like compromised accounts,
Okay.
insider threats,
Right.
or even like if someone's misusing their privileges,
Okay, like trying to access data they shouldn't be able to.
Exactly. Because these actions might look normal at a basic level,
Right.
but the behavioral analysis can reveal those like subtle signs.
Okay, that's pretty clever.
Yeah.
So we talked about detecting existing threats, but what about predicting future attacks? Like, can AI actually do that?
It can, yeah. And that's where predictive analytics comes in.
Okay. Predictive analytics, how does that work?
So by analyzing like past attack data, information from threat intelligence and known vulnerabilities, AI can actually start to predict where future attacks might come from
Okay.
and what tactics they might use.
So it's like it's learning from history to anticipate what might happen next.
Exactly. And that gives organizations a really important early warning, right?
Right, so they can be proactive instead of reactive.
Exactly. They can strengthen their defenses in those high-risk areas before an attack even happens.
So it's like a digital fortune teller, but based on data instead of a crystal ball.
Yeah, exactly.
We talked about NLP earlier. How does that fit into finding threats?
So security analysts, right?
Yeah.
They often have to sift through like massive amounts of text data,
Right.
emails, chat logs, threat reports. And AI with NLP can automatically analyze all that text to identify like mentions of phishing attempts, discussions among attackers about like new threats, and even extract those indicators of compromise.
So it's like having a superpowered research assistant who can read and understand all that data way faster than a human could.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And we shouldn't forget about visual data. Deep learning is really good with images and videos, right?
Absolutely. So deep learning powers the AI in those advanced security cameras.
Right.
It can automatically detect if someone enters a restricted area or identify suspicious objects and even like analyze crowd behavior for anomalies.
So it can pick up on things that a human guard might miss.
Yeah. And in like commercial settings, it can even be used for things like automatically detecting like slip and fall accidents, which is pretty cool.
Oh, wow. So it can help with safety as well as security.
Exactly.
It seems like AI's real strength comes from its ability to connect and analyze information from all these different sources, right?
You got it. So AI-driven security platforms, they can ingest data from all those different components we've been talking about, endpoints, the network, the cloud, the logs,
Right.
and then correlate events that might seem totally unrelated if you were looking at them separately.
So it's like it's putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
Exactly. And that lets them identify really complex attacks that might otherwise go unnoticed.
The ones that are designed to be stealthy and fly under the radar.
Exactly. And by seeing those connections, AI gives us a much clearer and more comprehensive understanding of the threat landscape.
So instead of just reacting to attacks as they happen, AI is letting us get ahead of the curve. Like the guide talks about moving from reactive to proactive threat management.
It's a big shift.
So what does that actually mean in practice?
So predictive threat intelligence is a key part of this, right?
Go ahead.
As we've talked about, AI analyzes tons of data to predict emerging threats, how attackers might operate, and even potential targets.
Right.
So security teams can be proactive,
Right.
like patching vulnerabilities before they're likely to be exploited.
So it's not just about finding existing weaknesses, it's about anticipating future attacks and preparing for them.
Exactly. And then there's automated vulnerability scanning and prioritization, right?
Okay. So the traditional scanners just tell you what vulnerabilities exist, right?
Yeah. AI adds context, It can analyze whether those vulnerabilities are actively being exploited, how easy they are to exploit, the potential damage.
So it helps security teams focus their efforts where they matter most.
Exactly. And then we've talked about threat hunting earlier.
Right. Actively searching for threats that might have slipped through